I'm just taking it in for a second. It was 5:30 in the morning, Pacific time in Los Angeles, California, in the United States, where I live. And I was sleeping, as you should be, at 5:30 in the morning. The phone rang, and it was my boss. And I was confused as to why he was calling me so early, because I wasn't going to be on the radio until 7 o'clock that evening. And he said nothing else except, turn on your television. As I walked down the hall, my stomach felt queasy. What was I about to see? When I turned on the television, I saw a plane stuck in a huge skyscraper in New York City. And then I saw another hit a second tower. And I saw things coming out of the building. And when I looked very, very closely, I noticed those weren't things. They were people. They were people jumping from these towers, the Twin Towers. The date was 9/11. The first thing I thought was, despite the shock and horror which was before my eyes on a Thursday morning, was I felt terrible for those people who had been in so much pain. They ended their lives. And then in the hours to come, the phone calls that the families and friends would receive that would forever change their lives. But then I said something. I said, please, God, don't have it be a Muslim who did this. Now, those of you looking at me and those of you who don't know me, you're probably wondering why a 5'2" white chick from Los Angeles, California, who has a Jewish father and a Christian mother, would ever say such a thing, would ever think such a thing. Why would I care, right? Well, for that, I need to take you back. I'm from Boston, Massachusetts originally. I did my bachelor's degree undergraduate at Northeastern University, and I attended the master's program at Emerson College. And I very much wanted to work in radio and television. And when I got out of college, Boston has so many colleges and universities, were not enough jobs to go around for the number of people graduating, including me. So I was lucky enough because I found a man who believed in me and said, if you move to Miami, Florida, I've got a job for you. So I packed up my car, and I moved 1,836 miles away from my family and my friends and what I had known as home to Miami. I was in the elevator in Miami because I'm going to date myself just a bit, but at the pool, they were filming a television show that was very famous in the United States many years ago called Miami Vice. Had anybody ever heard of that show here? Anybody at all? All the Americans and Canadians and Europeans. So there were going to be 2 movie stars at the pool, and my roommate and I are like, let's go downstairs to the pool and see movie stars. So I got on the elevator on the 5th floor where I live, and the elevator went down to pee quickly to the pool level, I was hoping, and then it stopped on 2, and I'm thinking, who dares to interrupt my voyage to Hollywood? And at 2, the doors opened, and there I saw, dare I say, a man with the most beautiful eyes I had ever seen in my life. That man and I became friends. I saw him around the apartment building. We became friends. And I assumed, because I was living in Miami, Florida, that he was Hispanic and he was Cuban. But he told me that he was Muslim. Muslim? Muslim. That means that he believes in Islam, the religion of Islam. He practices Islam. I know some Muslims. Yeah. Well, there was Ibi, who I went to college with in Jordan, and Muhammad, who was from the Emirates in college, and that girl who lived down the hall and wore that thing on her head who was from Iran. Yeah, I know some Muslims. 3. You see, because at that time of my life, like most Americans, I not only didn't know many Muslims, I knew nothing about Islam. Oh, let me correct that. I am ashamed to say I was extremely ignorant about the religion of Islam. See, I apologize in advance, but at that time, like most Americans, I believed about Islam that it was a religion that was for countries really far away from mine and where I lived. It was a religion of very primitive people who lived in the desert, rode camels. Every man had 4 wives. Women were extremely oppressed. Honor killings were a weekly practice as well as child marriages. There was nothing positive about this religion and therefore about the people. As a feminist, this bothered me. I was certain that every woman who's Muslim and every woman who covered herself, whether it was Shaval Kameez with a burqa, a hijab, was oppressed and was being forced to do so. And as a feminist, this bothered me. So Americans had a mindset about Islam, and I, as an American, I shared in that prejudice, those negative stereotypes, those false stereotypes, and the ignorance. Let me tell you why I think, and I'm not making excuses for it, but why I think many Americans feel that way, or at least felt that way. For decades, the United States has been an extremely close and strong ally to Israel, giving billions of dollars and weapons. They are our allies. And then Americans learn that Israelis, good. Israelis, Jewish, Israeli, allies. Allies and Jewish, good. Palestinians, not our allies. Muslims, Islam, bad. You follow me? And although it's not true and not a nice way of thinking, it is the way and was the way of much of American thinking. But that was all about to change for me. Because that friend I had made with the beautiful eyes, he asked me if I'd like to meet his family. And I said, sure. I could add a few more Muslims to the list of those I knew. And I had my very silly ideas. Would they throw a burqa over me the minute I got in the door? Did they have a scarf handy to wrap around my head? Would they have furniture? Did I have to sit on the floor? Was I going to have to pray 5 times? Would the food be good? Would I like it? Would it be spicy? Would I have to eat it with my hands? How shallow I, Leslie Marshall, was at that time, but that is truly what went through my mind. Quite the contrary. These were not primitive people. This friend's parents are both physicians, highly educated, his father, a general surgeon, his mother, an OBGYN. His family was warm, gracious, and kind. They didn't force me to dress anyway. They sat me on a chair, gave me delicious food, and a fork to eat it with. They were not trying to impress their religion on me. They were warm and gracious, as hosts should be when somebody comes into your home. I changed my mind about Muslims that day. Maybe I needed to rethink my mind on Islam. But before I tell you about my education on Islam, I'd like to point out that that friend has been my husband for 21 years. And that woman is my mother-in-law, and she is not oppressed. I'm glad a few laughed on that one. In order to educate myself more on Islam, I couldn't take people's word for what it really was about. See, being half Jewish and half Christian and brought up that way religiously, I had read cover to cover twice the Bible, both Old and New Testament, but I had never read the Quran. So I got a copy from my husband, and I read it cover to cover to see what it was in it for myself. And I learned quite a few things. I don't even have time to list all of them here today. One thing I learned is that honor killings are not only not a part of Islam, they're not lawful, according to Islam. That in Islam, they respect all religions. That Islam considers Jesus to be a prophet and holds him in high regard, higher regard than the Jews, the Israelis. And I also learned that like any other religion, without question, never an excuse for, murder is wrong and not permissible in Islam according to the Quran. My education on Islam and on Muslims stretched out and branched out into various countries, so I became even more educated in this regard personally. In 1996, I went to Israel. Being half Jewish, my father being Jewish, I was curious. And I must say, much like when I read the Quran and saw it with my own eyes for myself, I saw with my own eyes oppressed people, Palestinian people, who were truly oppressed. And I was shocked to see a wall that was similar in fashion to a ghetto during the Holocaust that my Polish ancestors were forced to stand behind. And I was ashamed of my Jewish side for that. While I was there, I traveled to Egypt. It was the year after the Luxor massacre. And there were people that said to me, "Don't tell them you're American, tell them you're Canadian." And I said, "Why? They hate Americans. Don't you know about the Luxor massacre?" I'm like, "Yeah, that was a tour bus of people from various countries. Don't tell them you're American." I get in the car at Cairo, nighttime, nice cool breeze to break up the heat of the day, driving. The taxi driver goes, "Where are you from?" I'm like, "The EU, Canada." And he said, "Oh, I thought you were American. Too bad. I was going to ask you about Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky." They didn't hate Americans. When I was sightseeing, a group of women wearing burqas, I could only see their eyes, were giggling. And you can tell a lot by the eyes. And they motioned for me to come over. And I was afraid, like, what are they going to do to me, right? And I walked over. They offered me to join them for lunch and wanted to know if my jeans were Levi's and wanted to touch them. We became friends. We swapped necklaces, sunglasses, pictures, addresses. The people were warm. The people were welcoming. A Muslim country, Muslim people, again, Islam. I also went to Jordan, and my married name is Hussein, and the king was Hussein. So I was a queen for a day, and they were wonderful to me. And Queen Noor from the United States of America was married to King Hussein of Jordan, and everyone asked me if I knew Queen Noor, forgetting how large the United States is. But again, they treated me with kindness. They treated me with respect, including Bedouins under tents near Petra who shared their lunch with me also. And then in 2007, a most wonderful thing occurred. My husband and I adopted our first child, our son, in Pakistan. And I had to live there for months, and this was after 9/11. Oh, and there were bad things said about Muslims and about Islam and about Muslim countries, but most certainly about Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. Didn't you know that everybody there was part of the Taliban, and they all hated Americans? And I was nervous. But I was included with the people that we visited and stayed with in Pakistan as a member of their family. To this day, we talk almost every day on Facebook. And in Pakistan, people opened up their homes and their hearts, and I saw with my own eyes some terrorist organizations, and I said to the driver bringing me to the airport, "What do you think of that?" And he said, "Well, what do you think I think of it? I live down the street from them. You live over there. I'm more afraid of them than you are." He wasn't signing his kid up for some terrorist summer camp, as many Americans would think. And he said to me as I got out of the car, I'll never forget, "Miss Leslie, please tell your George Bush president, don't bomb us like they did Iraq. We're nice people." Never forget that. How can you forget that? After 9/11, I won't lie, I was concerned. I was concerned for many reasons, one of which was selfish. My husband's an orthopedic surgeon with a Muslim Arabic last name. I frantically called his office on September 12th, and I said to his assistant, "Be honest with me, how many patients out of approximately 40 have canceled their appointments for today?" I braced myself for the answer. 0. Not one person had rescheduled their appointment. Not one person was afraid to go see, for the first time or a repeat visit or after their surgery, their Muslim doctor with an Arabic last name. Now, I'm not going to lie, after 9/11, the United States had its ideas, much divided in two areas about Islam. America's view of Islam has changed, and I'll tell you about that briefly. But after 9/11, it was very apparent where people stood. There were Americans who threw things at mosques or put pork on the door handles, who even killed a Coptic Christian man they thought was a Muslim just 2 towns from where I live in Los Angeles. There were slurs in writing and certainly verbally. Women taunted on the streets, mothers wondering if their daughters should wear their hijabs to school. More women putting on hijabs to show that they're Muslim and they're proud and they're American as well. But I also saw the education of some Americans. And I say that because I think out of every tragedy, there has to be some good, doesn't there? And I think there was some good after 9/11. People got to know their neighbors. I remember my in-laws were visiting us on September 14th, one of my brother's birthdays, and they were flying from Florida to California, and I was terrified for them. My mother-in-law wears a hijab. They have a Muslim Arabic last name. They're older. And when they came, and I said to my mother-in-law and father-in-law, "How was your journey?" She said the people were wonderful. They went out of their way to be nice to us, as if to say to us, without saying the words, "We don't blame you. We don't blame your religion of Islam for what happened on 9/11. Now, unfortunately, the world has been the victims of many terrorism acts since 9/11. While I was flying here, there was an act of terrorism on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. And of course, we all know just last week in Egypt at a Coptic Christian church. In the United States, I'm a member of the media, as you know, and in the United States, a lot of people rely on the media for their information. And unfortunately, I'm sure you've heard the phrase fake news, there's a lot of information that may not be accurate or that may be very one-sided. And people are watching this, and people are reading this, and people are listening to this, and that can be extremely dangerous. And I'll tell you why. Because there are some realities that not only America, but a lot of the Western world don't know. And I'm going to share some with you because I'm in the media, so you can believe everything I say, right? Just joking. 1, the overwhelming majority of victims of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or any other terrorist organization worldwide, hands down, numbers don't even match up, are Muslims. Not Americans or Christian. Muslims. Mostly non-American Muslims. And then there are heroes. Would you like to hear about some heroes in the Muslim community who practice and believe in Islam and show a religion of peace? A lot of people don't hear about stories when there were the attacks in Paris. In a Jewish deli, a Muslim man led 14 people down a back stairwell and saved their lives, all of them Jewish, he Muslim, and I think one French paper and one French television outlet covered that. In Orlando, Florida, after the shooting, the terrorist attack there was a Muslim Marine who ran into the nightclub while the shooter was still inside to pull bodies out so they would not get shot. In San Bernardino, California, where there was a terrorist attack by a man and his wife, a physician who had actually been trained and had been in the military, an Iranian Muslim, told the authorities, put on his riot gear with his medical bag, walked into the building while the terrorists were shooting people and was treating people. You don't hear about that. And last week in Egypt, there were numerous Muslims who helped the Coptic Christians in their community to safety, gave them CPR, first aid, transported them to get them medical attention. In November, it was a tough day for me as a liberal Democrat. But we got a new president in the United States of America. You might have heard about it. His name is Donald J. Trump. And at the time of his campaigning, he had a lot of things to say about Islam. He had a lot of things to say about Muslims, and a lot of rhetoric that was extremely divisive, hurtful, and I feel quite un-American. He talked about registries. He talked about bans, banning a religion. They wanted to do that in the Netherlands. Thank God that guy didn't get elected. But in the United States of America, this rhetoric just boiled up and fanned those flames of hatred, much like after 9/11. Do you know that Donald Trump proposed a travel ban that I and many others call a Muslim ban? And fortunately, good prevailed when half a dozen federal judges in the United States said, that is unconstitutional, Mr. President. You can't do it. But our president in my country, who knows I don't fancy him because he sees my negative tweets about him, is quite the narcissist, as you've heard. And President Trump was not going to give up, so they gave a second, revised, newer, and improved version of the Muslim ban. And guess what? Another set of federal judges knocked it down and said, that's unconstitutional, Mr. Trump. I'm sorry, no can do. You do not pass go. 51%, just over half of Americans, do not approve of the Muslim ban, the travel ban. And if you look at those polls and break down the numbers, it's even a higher number depending on how the questions are posed. America is divided. There's good and there's bad. And it's divided, I wouldn't say nearly in half. There are still some who have bad, what is America's view of Islam? Some have bad ideas of Islam. Some still view some of the uglier sides that Americans and those in the Western world are very uncomfortable with that is not part of the religion and I don't find in the Quran, such as child marriages or honor killings, and certainly murder and terrorism, because there are still some Americans that think that anyone who's a Muslim, you are a terrorist or you're a terrorist in the training, and certainly you're training your kids to be. But I want to tell you about some of the good, too, in that division. I want to show you some of the change that's occurred since 9/11. We have 2 elected congressmen currently in the United States Congress in the United States that are Muslim. 2, and that's in a post-9/11 world. President Barack Hussein Obama was elected, a man who had lived in a Muslim country. Obviously, he's not our president now. There was a women's march that was organized by a Muslim woman who wears a hijab, and over 5 million men and women worldwide listened and responded to her rallying cry. In Times Square, there were thousands of people that showed up for "Today I Am a Muslim." And the head of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, who was Jewish, said when President Donald Trump talked about imposing and having a Muslim registry, which would mean anybody who was Muslim would have to register. Talk about prejudice and unconstitutional in the United States. Do you know what he said? A Jewish man, head of the ADL. If you have a Muslim registry, I will register as a Muslim. This is the head of the ADL, a Jewish man. And then on Twitter, and then on Facebook, and then all over, and then my Jewish cousin at dinner, if they ever register, I'm registering as a Muslim. I just want you to know. Tell your husband. This became a movement, and I'm seeing that in my country. But let's go beyond the people, and let's go to the polls, shall we? There was a poll recently, just a couple of months ago, as to how warm people felt in America about Islam. 48%. Now, I know you think that's not very good, but 3 years ago, it was 10% lower. In 3 years, it has increased to 48%, and that's warm, feeling warm and fuzzy about Islam. And then there are realities that not only Americans and their views about Islam are going to have to change, but the reality is that Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. The reality is that over 1.6 billion people in this world are Muslims, and if you do the math, and I'm not good at it, but I did look it up, that's almost 25, almost a quarter of our population, almost 25% of the population, approximately 24% of the world's population.
Leslie, with 25 minutes, please conclude.
Huh?
Conclusion, please. We have 25 minutes.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
And the the reality also is that there are power in numbers. Somebody asked me once, well, what can anybody do to change this? Muslims can change this, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. One, get to know non-Muslims and tell them and teach them about Islam and let them meet you and find out, like I did firsthand, what a wonderful people you are and that Islam is a religion of peace. Two, get involved with your schools, run for office, have a carnival in your mosque parking lot, invite people into the mosque so they can see, well, that person may worship differently or believe in something different than I, but we're pretty much the same. And by the way, that's something I noticed in traveling the world. People are pretty much the same. We all have lousy traffic. We all complain about the weather. We all want a safer life for our future, and we all want a better future for our children. Last thing I want to say is America is waking up to Islam, what it is and what it isn't. I did, and as a woman married into a Muslim family, I am hopeful and even optimistic about Americans' view of Islam going forward in the future. Thank you, merci, shukran.
Leslie Marshall,